Welcome back to FNN News, FNN News Network. I'm your host, Sibel. First up today in new updates on the progress of the OLA. Most recently in the Western Zone in the Leka-Dulecha district of East Walaga, OLA forces took action against a Prosperity Party military camp located in Bandira, and afterwards the OLA captured the city and drove out some of those Prosperity Party troops. Several items of weaponry were captured. We'll show an image here that FNN News has obtained. These were some ammunitions that were captured during these battles. And this comes shortly after OLA forces did successfully rout an offensive maneuver by government troops in the town of Gute, which is in the Bonaya Molu district, and they destroyed some heavy weapons of the government troops there, as well as some vehicles that also occurred this week. In the Gobu Sayo district, the OLA also recaptured sections of the A4 highway, which runs from Nakamte to the capital of Finfine. Additionally, in new actions this week, in the town of Ada Ejersa in the Wara-Jarso district of North Shawa, 15 were killed in a conflict between OLA forces and government military units. In the town of Biriti, which is in the Kuyu district, OLA forces captured a military camp. 10 were killed and 7 were injured, reportedly, in that conflict in the Karkarsa Adabarga district. And in Hadama, which is located in the Adola Rede district of Guji, over 22 government soldiers were killed and 10 were injured in a conflict that broke out with OLA troops. And moving on to some other news on Oromia. 6 people, all of whom were relatives of OLF chairperson Dawid Ibsa Ayana, were reportedly killed in an attack in the area carried out by Amhara Fano terrorists. This occurred in the Abuna Gudina local administration of Horobuluk district on February 22nd. FNN has received some of the names of the people who were killed. We have 4 so far. Those include Lalise Shifara Kumsa, who was 60, Roba Firdisa Jabesa, who was 23 years old, Kisata Dula Aboma, who was 16 years old, Adanech Aboma Doresa, who was 30 years old. And we have also received some reports of a group of people who were kidnapped and released after 9 days by the same or an affiliated group. Those include Warke Lama Kalbesa, who was 23 years old, Ilfe Shifara Kumsa, who was 19, Lalise Tamara Asafa, who was 17 years old, and Misgane Nagasa Shifara, who was 26 years old. We also have an image here, some of the houses that were burned by the group. This has become a pattern of houses being burned in places where these militias carried out attacks, and we have received reports that it is fairly widespread. We also have some initial and unverified reports that suggest that 2 Amhara men who previously resided in that area were implicated in coordinating this specific attack and bringing the armed Fano group to the area. Reports suggest that they had organized first centrally in the Jardaga Jarte district of the Horoguduru Walaga. And we've also received some very disturbing and graphic footage of some similar and affiliated groups burning the bodies of some Oromo children in the 12th grade in the West Guji zone around the town of Bule Hora. This, as we know, is a violation of the Geneva Conventions and international law. We're not going to show this footage because it is very graphic, but we have received word that this has become a pattern also of burning bodies in these specific incidents that we've received reports from. And we've also received some unverified reports that roughly 500 homes were burned down by some affiliated groups in the East Walaga zones. The most hard-hit districts there were the Jardaga Jarte district, the Gida Kiramu district, the Abuna district, in the North Shawa zones. In the North Shawa zone, Karegoha, which is a town that is inhabited by both Oromos and Amharas, we've noticed has been a frequent target of reported attacks by these Amhara Fano groups. And some other reports previously found that 29 Oromos were killed by an Amhara militia in the Botoro Bora Kebele of the Abe Dengoro Wareda on February 12th, earlier this month. Those attackers during that incident reportedly set fire to 64 houses also. Some civilian witnesses said that that incident began when several of the attackers entered the village looking for some other members of the same militia who said that they had gone missing. And then in the early hours of the morning, they apparently opened fire on large numbers of people from close range. They also raped several women and girls, set fire to the houses, some of which still did have people in them. This area, the Horo Guduru zone, has become, unfortunately, a hotbed of violence against Oromos since these conflicts erupted in Ethiopia. According to some regional government reports, more than 128,000 people have now been displaced from the area surrounding the Guto Gida Wareda due to this violence that has broken out, perpetrated by Amhara militias. So far, FNN has not seen any response to these incidents or acknowledgement of them from the regional government forces or the regional government in those areas. So we're going to keep looking out for any kind of government response or statement that addresses and acknowledges these. And moving on to news on the ongoing drought. Prime Minister Abiy finally made a public statement, his first addressing this situation of water shortage that has threatened the livelihoods of an estimated 13 million people across the Horn of Africa. That includes an estimated 800,244 people in Oromia who are currently experiencing severe hunger due to this situation. We have some reports from UNICEF that I'll share here on the actual statistics of what is going on here. So here, UNICEF reporting on the drought that has really exacerbated in current months, even though it has actually been going on since around 2017. According to these UNICEF reports, around 225,000 children are malnourished. And this situation has been exacerbated by the death of an estimated 260,000 livestock, which is, of course, crucial for the survival of Oromo farmers living in rural areas. UNICEF has been nearing its goal, meanwhile, of $31 million in funding to take some humanitarian actions in response to this crisis. In Abiy's speech, however, we noticed that instead of announcing any kind of concrete plan to support these suffering farmers, he requested that regional banks helped to finance them. And he also said that seed growers and farmers who use large-scale irrigation could be incentivized to do so and continue those methods of farming by the government. But this is despite the fact that the government has failed to allocate any kind of significant federal funds to address this situation. And in the midst of all of this, the World Food Program is estimating that $219 million would be needed to fully address the food insecurity that is created by this situation. So far, we have not seen any kind of concerted effort on the monetary front for the government to manage this, as I said, rapidly deteriorating situation for many Oromos. Abiy has been previously criticized for shifting a good deal of resources towards funding the civil war, the internal war that has been going on simultaneously in the midst of these drought conditions that arose several years ago and have continued to ravage Oromia as well as some other nearby countries in the Horn of Africa. And moving on to, of course, the biggest story in global news, Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. This has sparked leaders around the world to impose very harsh sanctions on Russia and has effectively roiled global energy and oil and gas markets. Meanwhile, so far, we're seeing that Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy has failed to speak out or release any kind of statement addressing this. And so we're still in the dark about what kind of actions he might take in response to this current crisis in Ukraine. Nevertheless, the invasion of Ukraine could seriously affect an already unstable and volatile economic situation in Ethiopia due to some trade routes between Ukraine and Ethiopia. So we'll put up some data here, interesting data that I found on trade connections, exports and imports between Ethiopia and Ukraine. So essentially, Ukraine is a much larger exporter to Ethiopia than Russia is by far, which is surprising considering that it is a much smaller country. I'll put this up here. Trade exports from Ukraine to Ethiopia dropping off in 2018, but coming roaring back now, much lower during the pandemic. However, we have some data here showing that some of the largest exports traveling over to Ethiopia, the first being iron and steel, but the second, third, and fourth being essentially edibles, food-related goods. So wheat, and other cereals is a huge factor in terms of exports that are running to Ethiopia from Ukraine. So, of course, that brings up the question of what kind of effect this conflict is going to have on the Ethiopian economy, already suffering with very large inflation that is difficult to handle. And especially this could exacerbate the situation with food insecurity, which is already a huge sticking point in terms of the situation in Ethiopia right now. So going forward, we're going to have to see how this might have an effect on the Ethiopian economy. Indeed, how it might have an effect on any global economy, any country's economy around the world. But flagging right now that the implications for an already serious situation of food insecurity in Ethiopia could potentially worsen as this conflict continues and we see this conflict unfold in Ukraine. And that is all today. We'll continue to update our viewers on the situation in Ethiopia, new developments in Oromia, whether this Ukraine conflict is going to have any kind of effect on trade relations, and also the drought which continues in Oromia and surrounding regions. Once again, thanks for watching FNN News, FNN News Network, and I am your host, Sibel.